Today, we're diving deep into Britain invaded Manila in 1762 and almost conquered the Philippines forever. Spain ruled the Philippines for over 300 years. The Spanish Empire controlled territories across the globe, from Mexico to the Caribbean to South America. But on October 6, 1762, something shocking happened that most Filipinos today have never even heard of. A British naval fleet sailed into Manila Bay. What followed was a 9-month occupation that nearly cost Spain the entire Philippine archipelago forever. This is the story of how the British almost conquered the Philippines, and why your history textbooks completely forgot about it. Why this matters today. The British occupation of Manila happened during the 7 Years' War, a global conflict that basically determined which European powers would control the world's trade and resources for the next 2 centuries. It's one of the most important wars in human history, but it's barely taught in schools. The conflict stretched from Europe to North America to Asia. The British were fighting against France and Spain simultaneously, trying to become the dominant superpower. Most people know about the fighting in North America or Europe, but almost nobody knows what happened in the Philippines. And honestly, what happened in Manila reveals incredible political drama, military strategy, and the fragility of colonial power. Why was the Philippines even involved? In 1762, the Philippines had been a Spanish colony for 160 years. Spain had absolute control. The Spanish founded Manila in 1571, and it became the center of Spanish colonial power in Asia. They established the galleon trade, massive ships that sailed from Manila to Acapulco, Mexico, carrying gold and resources back to Spain. This made Manila incredibly wealthy and strategically important. The Spanish had fortified the city. They had a governor, military garrisons, and a merchant fleet. To the Spanish, Manila felt secure, isolated, protected by distance from any real threat. But they made a massive miscalculation. Spain entered the 7 Years' War in 1761, siding with France against Britain. This was a catastrophic decision because Britain's navy was absolutely dominant. Britain had the most powerful fleet in the world. When Spain joined the war late, British naval forces were already operating across the globe, attacking Spanish colonies and trade routes. Spain had resources stretched thin, fighting in Europe, the Caribbean, and everywhere else. Suddenly, the Philippines, sitting out in the middle of the Pacific, became vulnerable in ways the Spanish governors never anticipated. If you're amazed by our ancestors' story, Britain invaded Manila in 1762 and almost conquered the Philippines forever, help us hit our 500-like goal. Drop a comment about your favorite fact and subscribe to join the HISTO-PH family. The invasion begins. The British arrive in 1762. A British naval squadron under Admiral Samuel Cornish sailed from India toward Manila. This wasn't a massive invasion force like D-Day or something, but it was powerful enough. The British had 5 ships of the line, massive warships, plus frigates, sloops, and transport vessels. They carried soldiers, supplies, and the determination to strike Spain where it hurt. The British government wanted to cripple Spanish trade and capture valuable Spanish possessions. On September 22, 1762, the British fleet first approached Manila Bay. Spanish defenders spotted them immediately. The Spanish governor, Miguel de Almodovar, had some warning, but not much time to prepare. Spain's fleet in the Philippines was relatively small and unprepared for a direct assault by the world's most powerful navy. The Spanish had some forts, some soldiers, and some ships, but they were badly outnumbered. The British moved with tactical precision. They attacked the Spanish ships guarding the bay entrance. The Spanish fought back fiercely. There was real combat, real bloodshed, but they couldn't match British firepower. The Spanish fleet was damaged and forced back into the harbor. Some Spanish ships were captured or sunk. Within days, the Spanish realized their naval situation was hopeless. The assault and occupation. What happened next was a coordinated land and sea assault. British forces landed troops near Manila. They began attacking Spanish fortifications. The Spanish defensive line crumbled. Governor Almodovar realized that defending the entire city was impossible. After some fighting, the Spanish negotiated terms and withdrew their forces. On October 6, 1762, British forces entered Manila. They raised the British flag. For the first time in 160 years, the Spanish flag didn't fly over Manila. British soldiers now occupied the city. This was absolutely shocking to Spain and the Spanish colonists. The idea that Manila could fall seemed impossible, but it had happened. The British occupation lasted from October 1762 until May 1763, about 9 months. During that time, the British controlled Manila and much of the surrounding region. They established military rule. They tried to maintain order and seized Spanish property and resources. The British were interested in strategic advantage, trade, and destabilizing Spanish colonial power. For Filipinos living under Spanish rule, this was chaos and uncertainty. Nobody knew what would happen. Would the British be permanent rulers? Would they transform the Philippines into a British colony? Why this was such a big deal? Here's what makes this invasion so significant. The British had the power to keep the Philippines. They had the military might. They had demonstrated they could take and hold Manila. If they'd decided to stay, if they'd poured resources into making the Philippines British instead of Spanish, the entire history of Southeast Asia would have been completely different. Imagine if the Philippines had become a British colony instead of a Spanish one. Everything changes: language, culture, religion, colonial development, the path to independence, everything. The Spanish crown understood this existential threat. Manila's capture forced Madrid to seriously consider that they might lose the Philippines forever. They contemplated actually abandoning the colony because they couldn't defend it. This was a moment where the Spanish Empire really felt its power slipping. Why the British left? So if the British could take Manila and could have kept it, why did they leave? The answer is the Treaty of Paris, signed in February 1763, which officially ended the 7 Years' War. Britain and Spain negotiated. Britain gave back Manila and the Philippines to Spain in exchange for other territorial concessions. Britain wanted Havana in Cuba, a much more strategically important prize in their view, so they traded Manila back to the Spanish. The British also gained Florida, Canada, and other territories that they saw as more valuable. From a strategic perspective, Britain made the calculation that holding the Philippines wasn't worth the investment and military resources required to defend it across the vast Pacific Ocean. Canada, the Caribbean, and India seemed like better prizes, so the British withdrew. Spanish forces reoccupied Manila. the Spanish flag went back up. Spain retained the Philippines, but they'd been badly shaken. They'd learned that their colonial possessions weren't as secure as they'd believed. The aftermath changed forever. The invasion and occupation had lasting effects. The Spanish strengthened their military presence in the Philippines afterward. They rebuilt fortifications. They brought in more troops. They tightened control. But something had shifted psychologically and strategically. Spain's confidence in their imperial invincibility was shaken, and the Philippines itself experienced massive disruption, economic damage, military conflict, uncertainty about the future. Additionally, the occupation revealed the wealth and resources of the Philippines. The British recognized the value. This knowledge spread through European powers. Later, other European powers became more interested in the region. The Philippines couldn't stay isolated and peaceful under Spain anymore. The British invasion had put them on the map as a prize worth fighting for.